हरि ओम शन्नो मित्रः क्षं वरुणः शन्नो भवत्वर्यमा शन्नो इन्द्रो बृहस्पतिः शन्नो विष्णुरुक्रमः नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायो त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्मासि त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारामवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ सहना भवतु सहनो भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
Namaskar. Good evening to all of you. स्वामी परमात्मा जी जो आज हमारे इस कार्यक्रम के चीफ गेस्ट हैं, हमारे ऑथर पार्थो जी, डॉक्टर अनिर्बान गांगुली जी, आप सबको आज के कार्यक्रम में स्वागत है। आज का फंक्शन हमारा एक बहुत यूनिक फंक्शन है। इसमें हम पार्था जी की एक किताब जिसका नाम है दिस इज सनातन धर्मा द क्वेस्ट फॉर ट्रूथ, उसका विमोचन करेंगे और उसके ऊपर कुछ डिस्कशन करेंगे। ये एक सब्जेक्ट ऐसा है जिसमें हम सबको बहुत बड़ा इंटरेस्ट है, लेकिन शायद इतनी जानकारी नहीं है। हम सब फील करते हैं सनातन धर्म क्या है, लेकिन सनातन धर्म के जो बेसिक कॉन्सेप्ट्स हैं, डेफिनेशंस हैं, उसके बारे में जब हम बात करें तो शायद इतना ज्ञान हमें ना हो। एक परिचय जरूर है, लेकिन शायद that precision that we require is often missing. And I think this book, and I was only glancing through this book, I have not yet read it, but it's certainly a few pages that I looked at have impressed me greatly. And today I think is a chance for us to not only discuss this book, but also relate it to today's context and circumstances that we see both in our personal lives, in our society, in our country, and in the world. So I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you for this discussion, which is being organized under the aegis of our monthly program every March. So before I get into the program, let me also just briefly introduce our author, Shri Partho. He is described as a poet, writer, and teacher of Vedanta. He writes on spiritual yoga, dharma, and Vedanta. A follower of the integral Vedanta philosophy of Shri Aurobindo, Shri Partho was deeply influenced by the vision of Swami Vivekananda when he was young. And it was Swami Vivekananda's vision and influence that brought him to Sri Aurobindo and the mother. In this book, Sri Partho explores the philosophical and mystical foundation of Sanatan Dharma. According to him, Sanatan Dharma is more than a religion to be followed. It's a truth to be realized. The author also holds that Sanatan Dharma is a dynamic and evolving religion that leads towards self-awakening and self-realization. As I said, many of us may not be aware of the precise meanings of the various concepts and definitions and the foundation of Sanatan Dharma. And we often confuse it with, is it a religion? Is it a way of life? Is it code of conduct? What is it? I think today the author will explain. And this book is really very handy. It's written in short chapters, and each chapter takes up a concept, etc. And it's very accessible. I think all of us can understand it very easily. So the book explains the key philosophical, foundational, and divine ideas of Sanatan Dharma in a simple and lucid manner. It talks about the main concepts like Brahman, Advait, Atma, Yoga, Gyan, Karma, Moksha, Purush, Prakriti, etc. And all of us are familiar with these concepts, but I think he goes into some depth and some precision while talking about these concepts. This book, I think, will be particularly useful to young generation who have not, been exposed to these. Earlier, there used to be Ramayana Katha, there used to be visit to temples, there used to be a lot of discussion, discourse at home, etc. All that has been taken over by WhatsApp University, Twitter, and so on and so forth. Although I find that some of it, particularly on the YouTube, you do find some very good discourses. And I'm learning a lot from YouTube because we don't get the benefit of having you all every day. But yes, I think by and large, this exposure with the people who know, the seers, these Sant and others, philosophers, experts, is really few and far between these days. So this book, I think, fills up a very important gap in the learning process of our young people. Sri Partha's book is an effort not only to inform the readers of the key features of Sanatan Dharma, but also highlight the contribution of Sri Aurobindo, whom he describes as one of the greatest spiritual rishis of modern India. The chapter on Maharishi Sri Aurobindo is particularly illuminating as it encapsulates Sri Aurobindo's vast vision and key messages and their continuing relevance to India and also for humanity. The author laments that our schools and universities hardly touch Sri Aurobindo's in any depth. Actually, they touch hardly anything in depth. So I think, again, that chapter is very nicely written, very brief, but very, very pointed. We are honored to have scholars and the practitioners, and nobody could be better than Swami Parmatman Saraswati ji, who is a convener and Secretary General of Hindu Dharmacharya Sabha. He is a senior disciple of Swami Dayanand Saraswati, a scholar of Vedanta and founder Acharya of Arsha Vidya Mandir. He gives talks on contemporary problems of society informed by profound knowledge of Vedanta. His discourses are lively and informative, and what is important, I think, is his deep empathy for society and his interest in social problems. And I had the honor of interacting with him briefly when he was here in another interaction with Muhammad Alisa, who came from Saudi Arabia, and he interacted with Swamiji and some other spiritual leaders. And that was a very illuminating meeting. So thank you, Swamiji, for being with us today, and we look forward to your thoughts. Dr. Anirban Ganguly, who is well known to this audience, has been here many times. He is the chairman of Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Foundation and a member of National BJP Executive Committee. He is a scholar of civilization, history, politics, and culture, and a member of Central Advisory Board of Education. I think it's very important that you have left a lasting impression, I think, hopefully. new education policy and all that. No, I think we need, a lot of these things should get into our education. That is, I think, one of the reference of your book also. He has a PhD in education from Jadavpur University, Kolkata, author of several books. In the last count, I think counted about 10 that you have now 12. I think you need it update every year. Author of several books, Dr. Ganguly has traveled extensively and spoken at a number of think tanks and conferences, including at the VIF. He had his early education at Sri Aurobindo International Education Center, Pondicherry. He is a member of the governing board of Auroville Foundation, as well as a member of Vishwabharati Sansad Shanti Niketan. I hope this is updated or former. So he'll tell us what is he doing these days, apart from what I described in the early lines. Used in the present. So thank you, Anirban, for joining us, and look forward to hearing your thoughts on the book as well. So I think according to the program, now I will request Shri Patho to say a few words, maybe about 15-20 minutes about the book, introduce the book, and then we can go and request our Anirban and then chief guest to make some remarks.
Pranam, Swamiji. And my Guru Bhai, Anirban, Dr. Gupta. Many friends here, ladies and gentlemen. Though I don't have much to say about the book, because the book will, I'm confident, speak for itself. But a few salient points I would definitely like to mention today regarding the book and, more importantly, its subject. Long years ago, when I was still in the university, and this was before my first inner encounter with Swami Vivekananda, which was the turning point of my life. I was then very keenly involved with philosophy, mostly Western philosophy. And I had very little sympathy and even less understanding of Hindu Dharma, Sanatan Dharma. And most of it that had come to me had come in terms of rituals, superstitions, prescribed formulae. And, somehow my heart or my mind never resonated to it. Till there came a point where we had a very interesting discussion in the university. This was the University of Delhi, where there was a group of students and a couple of professors from Cambridge who were having a dialogue with a few scholars from Delhi University, and the subject was Indian nationalism, Sri Aurobindo and Sanatan Dharma. A very interesting topic, and during that conversation, I felt rather challenged. That, having studied so much of philosophy and literature, we know so little about this subject, Sanatan Dharma, and we understand so little of nationalism and what Sri Aurobindo truly represented. And that, I think, was the first time I really wanted to read something that would make sense of Sanatan Dharma. And that was also the beginning of a search for the right kind of book. And mind you, again, this was before. I have these two phases of my life, pre-Swami Vivekananda and post-Swami Vivekananda. So this was pre-Swami Vivekananda. And through the years then, what started at that time, I began to realize there is, or at that point, there was no book on Sanatan Dharma that would make sense to a young university student of Western philosophy, English literature, who would read it and resonate with it and feel an inner urge to reconnect with the spirituality of this country that we call ours. The essential Bharat that lives in her Sanatan Dharma. And I remember feeling that very vividly till the auspicious moment came and I had my encounter with Swamiji, Swami Vivekananda. And that brought me fully into the stream, what shall I call it, perennial stream of Sanatan thinking, Sanatan philosophy, Sanatan Darshan. And this book is, in a very profound sense, my personal response to those first queries that I had as a young university student of wanting to read a book that would really tell me what Sanatan Dharma is, what is its origin, what is behind its superstitions, what is behind its rituals, what is behind its gods and goddesses. And is there something behind? Is it all symbolic? Or is there some truth behind the symbolism that would make sense? So much later, I, instead of going on with my search for a book, I resolved within myself to write one. I stood in front of my gurus, Mother Sri Aurobindo Swamiji, and said that, may your blessings be with me, I shall attempt to write a book. And that was the beginning, the genesis of this book. And I soon discovered it was nearly impossible for anyone to write about Sanatan Dharma, encompassing its vastness, its depths. Nearly impossible. It would have taken me decades. So I had to make a choice that what is it about Sanatan Dharma that I resonate with personally, that I can write about honestly and sincerely. And that is what defines this book. The Vedanta of Sanatan Dharma, the mysticism, the spiritual mysticism of Sanatan Dharma, which I found the more I explored, the more I experienced, the more I understood of this Dharma, the more I saw it behind everything that this Dharma represented. All its movements, its rituals, its expressions, its varied expressions, rich, complex, and varied expressions. There was always this one background strain of a mystical, profoundly mystical spirituality, an adhyatmikta. It brought alive, and I must mention when I speak that I've also been a very, very keen student of physics for many, many years. I think I've studied physics for more years than students of physics do. And when I began to explore and experience the mysticism and the spirituality, the Vedanta of Sanatan Dharma, it not only made sense to me as a student of philosophy, but also as a student of physics. Suddenly, the universe made sense. Suddenly, there was meaning, there was richness, there was challenge, there was creativity, there was joyfulness. And all that stemmed from just the first glimmerings of a true understanding of Sanatan Dharma. So the choice I made while writing this book was to focus on 2 or 3 aspects of Sanatan Dharma that were critical to my understanding. It's a very personalized approach. I know, and I've mentioned in the book, that it's a very vast subject, and it's nearly impossible to write on all the aspects of Sanatan Dharma. And there are many that I have not touched upon. There are some that I've briefly touched upon. But the ones that I've really explored and gone to the depths, a deep dive, as I call it, was the Vedanta of Sanatan Dharma and the Yoga of Sanatan Dharma. For me, as I've written repeatedly in the book, Sanatan Dharma is Vedantic in its conception. And I borrow this phrase from Sri Aurobindo actually when he talks about integral yoga. When he was once asked, what is this integral yoga of yours? He said it's Vedantic in conception and tantric in execution. So I borrowed that phrase, paraphrase it to explain what Sanatan Dharma means to me. That's Vedantic in conception and yogic in implementation, execution, practice. So to understand Sanatan Dharma without understanding its Vedanta would not just be not possible, but would be a singular disservice to Sanatan Dharma. And there is a lot of dialogue, there's a lot of discourse happening on Sanatan Dharma, even as we speak right now, even as we sit here. And most of us will be quite aware of what's happening the world over. This is this global tirade against Hindu Dharma and against Sanatan Dharma. And this is historic, and I don't need to repeat all that. We know the history behind it, how Sanatan Dharma has been regarded internationally and within our own country, tragically, this country of his birth, and how people have been led to misunderstand Sanatan. Not just not understand, but misunderstand it. I will not, of course, go into details, but that was quite painful for me. And I began to realize that there needs to be not one book, perhaps series of books that would begin to influence and hopefully go on to reshape the discourse of Sanatan Dharma, the dialogue around Sanatan Dharma. This is a tremendous need, not just personally, it's a tremendous collective need today, that this is one subject that must be discussed more and more extensively and intensively by young people in this country, by academia, by scholars, writers, even government officials, and just about anyone I can think of in any sphere of life. So to do this, to engage meaningfully in a dialogue or a discourse around Sanatan Dharma, it is very, very important to my mind to grasp the Vedanta of Sanatan Dharma. But grasping the Vedanta of Sanatan Dharma would be only the first and incomplete step. To complete it, we would need to go to the yoga of Sanatan Dharma. Because whatever we can comprehend as the Vedanta, the mystical philosophy of Sanatan Dharma, needs to be put into practice. It needs to be lived in the mind, in the life, and in the body. And then collectively, in society, in the nation, as a civilization. So how to do that? How to bring that profound mystical philosophy of Vedanta that is the bedrock of Sanatan Dharma to daily practice, living practice. That's yoga. Yoga is the bridge. Yoga tells us how to do it, how to live Sanatan Dharma. What exactly is Sanatan Dharma and its pure, forceful expression on earth, in the mind, in the body, in our lives. So those are the aspects, therefore, that I took up for this book, the Vedanta and the Yoga of Sanatan Dharma, and I've touched briefly upon also the leading godheads or divinities of Sanatan Dharma. And there's also a brief section on Sanatan Dharma and contemporary relevance, its contemporary relevance. I'm very aware of the fact, as I stand here in front of you, that this book is just beginning. While writing this book, I discovered that I can probably write 10 more to do justice to the subject. And Gurudev willing, I probably will attempt another one immediately after this to explain a few more aspects and dimensions which I could not attempt in this book. Once again, keeping the Vedanta and the yoga in the background. And I do hope that someday you do get the opportunity and the time to read this book, and I'll be very, very happy to engage in any kind of conversation or debate about the subject. Once again, I'm delighted and privileged to have Swamiji himself here, and these are the thought leaders and practitioners of this great Dharma of ours. And also this happened on its own. I didn't have to do anything about it. Anirban is someone I've always been very fond of since I heard him first time at the Gnostic Center event. A person who's not just studied at the Sri Aurobindo International Center in Pondicherry, but and this is my feeling, that somebody who embodies it in perhaps one of the most difficult and challenging fields in this country, governance and politics. And he's bringing the Dharma in the place where it must be brought in. That is crucial. The more Dharma gets into the bloodstream of this country, the more we can realize our national destiny and our individual destinies. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. So we'll read the book as well. कोई publisher यहाँ बैठे थे शायद
Anirban Ganguly.
स्वामी जी के साथ I request now Dr. Anirban Ganguly. Please make his remarks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arvind Gupta, Director, Vivekananda International Foundation. And I must really appreciate, deeply appreciate. It's always a very unique feeling to be on this side and not on that side. Usually I'm always on that side. I must really appreciate that there are a number of international think tanks in the national capital. But this is the only international think tank which repeatedly touches upon these subjects. Other think tanks are cautious. They prefer not to get into discussing the narratives of Hinduism or the narrative of Hindutva or Sanatan Dharma. They usually traverse the safe grounds of governance, of strategy, of defense, of international relations, etc., etc. Vivekananda International Foundation has left its mark on all of these subjects, but I think it stands out uniquely because it gives space to such kind of discourse and discussion. And I must really uniquely thank Dr. Gupta because he has this interest, he has this developing interest in these subjects. He encourages scholars to come, and he is also a learner. So I think that's what makes VIF stand apart, and I'm extremely grateful, deeply delighted that, and I'm honored that I could come here today and discuss and be part of this discussion with one of the most respected figures, someone whom we continue to deeply revere, and whose blessings is there with us every day, at every moment. Revered Swami Parmatman ji. And of course, in the presence of my very dear friend Parthuda, I don't know, he's been very economical with his past, but I must tell you here that today, a lot of what we see in the NEP, in the National Education Policy, an education policy and education for 21st century India, that the National Education Policy is, a lot of what the National Education Policy today envisages and seeks to implement was discussed at least 2 decades back by Parthuda in his book on integral education. And that was a book which inspired a lot of us. Many of us read it from end to end. And this is his next incarnation, his work on Sanatana Dharma. And I think, therefore, having known the author in his previous avatar, I would certainly recommend this book in his current incarnation. Now, You see, my dilemma is, and I hope I'll have some time, because 15 minutes, obviously I'll stick myself to 15 minutes. But my dilemma is, I'm sitting in between a jnani and a yogi, a seer and a jnani. And so what about me? I mean, at the end of his life, when somebody asked Ananda Kumara Swami, what is it original that you have said? Have you said something original? He said, no, I have only interpreted what the masters have said. And if Ananda Kumara Swami, at the end of a life that he led, with that kind of prolific output, could say this, we are adhamo dhamma, I think there's not much that I can only say that whatever I'll say will be an approximation, or it will be an interpretation of all that has already been said in the past. And of course, thank you for your very generous praise. Parasparam prashansanti aho rupam aho dhvani. Now, Parthoda's book has to be read from the end, not from the beginning. I mean, you can read it the way you want. You don't have to follow it from page 1 to page 230. You can start from 239 and come to page 1. I think that is how any quest ought to be, because a quest is always goes to the next level after having based itself on concrete experience. And so therefore, that is exactly what I did. And if you look at the chapters at the end, a symbolic restoration, he speaks about Ram Rajya. And I'm happy that he is also brought into the word Hindutva in his book. And he says, Ram Rajya is not just a political theory, but a growing spiritual need in the lives of men and nations. Ram Rajya is the kingdom of truth on earth. And to establish a Ram Rajya, however we may choose to designate it in India, must be Hindutva's aim and objective. Anything short of this and India's struggle for a dharmic rashtra will not be complete. I think these are very perceptive words. And we, when we come to Vivekananda International Foundation, of course, we are not allergic to the word Hindutva, unlike in some other places. Then, of course, he speaks about dharmic rashtra, secularism, and dharma nirapeksha. And that is, if you go to page 239, he comes to the usual topic as to what is secularism in the Indian context. It has no basis. Secularism in the Indian context is anti-religious, and it is being translated as dharma nirapeksha. How can a state be dharma nirapeksha? Dharma drives civilizational India. And therefore you saw that when the Sengol was established in the Indian Parliament, was reinstated in the Indian Parliament, the Sengol was not a religious symbol. It was a symbol of dharma, of dharmic rule, a rule which is compassionate, which is responsive, which is responsible, which is accountable, and which is based on equity and justice. That was dharma. And the Sengol represented, it was an emblem of dharma and not a walking stick, as was mentioned in a particular museum in Allahabad. And then, of course, he speaks about the need for dharmic education for those of us who have grown up in an alternative system of education, and for those of us who are witnessing national education policy today. It clearly exudes that dharmicness in education. And then Maharshi Sri Aurobindo, the chapter, then Dharma in 21st century. And at the beginning of the book, Hinduism is Sanatan Dharma. He speaks about the post-independence neglect of thought leaders and masters of the Sanatan tradition. How India post-independence neglected. I mean, could we even imagine that till the other day, there was no university named after Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda was never taught as a course in university curricula. There was no university in the name of Sri Aurobindo, one of the greatest educationists, even if I leave aside his yoga, one of the greatest education visionary in India in 20th century India. And so therefore, he rightly mentions, and no holds barred, he hits it on the head when he says, that these masters, Sri Aurobindo, Swami Vivekananda, Sri Ramakrishna, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, or numberless sages, other sages and seers who spoke and wrote of Dharma were neglected in the psyche, in the system, in the educational curriculum, in the making of independent India. And I think he says it, he speaks our heart when he obviously takes a very strong dig at the left liberal mindset, which doesn't believe in these things, which have an allergy to Sanatan Dharma. And he has a chapter on how to become a Hindu, which is a very interesting conversation that he has with a Western professor. And while I was reading that chapter, I was reminded of Sitaram Goel, one of the profoundest and most prolific and one of the most articulate writer, expositor of Sanatan Dharma, of Hinduism, of Hindutva also. Sitaram Goel wrote, Partho has written How to Become a Hindu. Sitaram Goel wrote How I Became a Hindu. And that was in 1982. And if you read Partho's, towards the end, Parthoda's last chapter, Postscript, a personal context, where he starts with, though I was born into the Hindu Dharma, it took me nearly 3 decades to come to any real understanding of it. Sitaram Goel in How I Became a Hindu, and I would recommend this book to all those who have not read it, but I think many have read. This is a very erudite audience. Sitaram Goel says, I was born a Hindu, but I ceased to be one by the time I came out of college at the age of 22. I became a Marxist and a militant atheist. I had come to believe that Hindu scriptures should be burnt. And then he goes on to say, 15 years after that, he realized what a mega egoistic approach that was, a utopian egoistic approach. And he writes it very well if one goes through that little book. It's not very heavy. Now, as I said, I am going to make a certain proposition and some approximations, because this book is a personal journey as well, is a personal quest. And if Gandhiji could, through my experiment with truth, evolve into the Mahatma, I'm sure you are already on the way to becoming a very intense thinker as well. This book is light, it doesn't weigh on you, and it is conversational. It's as if Partho, the seeker, is speaking to you, you are engaging with him. And that is where this book stands out. And it invites you to discover Sanatan Dharma, the basic of Sanatan Dharma, in your own way, through your own understanding. And Partho gives you certain signposts. He leaves you with a certain indications. And of course, in it, through this book, permeated is Sri Aurobindo and Swami Vivekananda. Now, with the few minutes that are left to me, I want to make a certain construct. It is fundamental that we go back to fundamental texts. And so when we discuss Sanatan Dharma, when we discuss Hinduism, I think I have a problem. And Savarkar in his Hindutva discusses this 1921-22, and very interestingly, Savarkar wrote the basic of his Hindutva treatise while in cellular jail, under that excruciating torture that he underwent. Savarkar wrote this book, the starting point of that book. Now, my point is communism, but why Hinduism? Can it not be Hinduness? Hindutva, Tattva, Hinduness. And there's a very strong argument towards why that must be. But I come back to my point of a fundamental reading and understanding of fundamental texts. Parthoda's book is meant to be read because it leads you to these fundamental texts. It can lead you to these fundamental texts if you are serious about the quest. And so I start by saying this, that there are, in my understanding, there are about 10 to 11 texts or perceptions that we can look at or examine. I start with, and why do I say this? Why do I speak about these fundamental texts or personalities or thought leaders or masters of Sanatan Dharma, as you said? Because over the decades, over the last 2 centuries, these were the fundamental thinkers who shaped our quest for Sanatana Dharma, who led the awakening towards our cultural, civilizational self-recovery, and they did it through by contributing certain fundamental thought or certain fundamental movements. Now I'll just quickly read. Nabagopal Mitra, the founder of the Hindu Mela, which was started in 1867. Sri Aurobindo's maternal grandfather, Rishi Rajnarayan Bose. He was called the grandfather of Indian nationalism because he was Sri Aurobindo's grandfather. And his Hindu Dharmir Shreshthata, the superiority of Hindu Dharma, 1873, just a year after Sri Aurobindo was born, was a seminal and fundamental text. The first time a Hindu, an Indian thinker, spoke out to the West, saying that, look, your misconceptions about Hindu Dharma, you have misconceptions about Hindu Dharma. This is who and this is what we really are. Hindu Dharma Shrestota. The original is in Bengali. It has not yet been translated. Perhaps, Praveen, you can take up this work also, translating these fundamental texts. Then 1882 is a very important year, not 1885, not when the Indian National Congress was formed. 1882, Bande Mataram, a fundamental seminal text, Anandamath Bande Mataram, in our concept of talking back. 1892, Chandranath Basu's Hindutva, Hindur Prokrito Itihash. I mean, it's just by chance that they are all Bengalis. There are some who are not Bengalis in it. It is not that Partho, Da, and myself. And so, that's why I'm reading out these names, but these are historically. So Chandranath Basu historically is the first Indian to use the word Hindutva. Much before Savarkar did it, much before even the Communist Party of India was formed in India, which was in 1921. In 1892, and I'm looking at this from the socio-political aspect because I have a dimension which is political, but as I said, I want to make it academic, intellectually political also. So Chandranath Basu, 1892, we are not taught these things in the curriculum, was the first one to use the word Hindutva in his seminal text, and where he clearly says, he speaks about a unique fundamentalism in the Hindu Dharma, a unique extraordinariness in the Hindu Dharma. And Chandranath Basu writes that it is Hindu Dharma is the only Dharma. I mean, one can always differ. This is a point of view. Like this is a point of view that I am placing. But he says that it is the only religion, it is the only Dharma which has not taken anything from anywhere else. It stands on its own creations, which is a very strong statement. And then he goes on to write about it. He says, Bankim based his articulation of Hindutva on our scriptures. Bhudev Mukherjee, they were all his contemporaries, based his study of Hindutva on social, samajik texts. I am basing myself on religious, cultural, literature, as well as the achar acharon, jeta bola jete pare, I mean, the social religious behavior that they have. Then, of course, we come to Swami Vivekananda, 1897, the common basis of Hinduism. Even if you don't read the 9 volumes, please read 1897 in Lahore at the invitation of the Arya Samaj and the Sanatan Dharma Sabha. Swami Vivekananda delivered one of his finest addresses, the common basis of Hinduism. And such a strong, he says, I'm one of the proudest men ever born, but let me tell you frankly, it is not for myself, but on the account of my ancestry. And especially at this time, when the woke narratives are getting more and more strong, when nothing is sacred, your civilizational symbols are being destroyed because we are entering into a woke narrative dominance. Swami Vivekananda's common basis of Hinduism, I think, gives a very strong rejoinder and counter. This was 1897. Then we come to 1910, Uttarpada speech, Sri Aurobindo's, which is there in the appendix in the book. I would urge all of you to read it and read it. 1910, Sri Aurobindo's Uttarpada speech. There is a certain scholarship which says, oh, Sri Aurobindo himself outlived the Uttarpada speech. I think it's not for us to judge whether he really outlived or not. It is for us to absorb and to delineate and articulate our narrative of Sanatan Dharma, as Sri Aurobindo articulated for the first time. Any public leader, any public political leader of his stature spoke openly about Sanatan Dharma, the Hindu nation, and the Hindu past and the future. And he says, I say it is the Sanatana Dharma for us, which is nationalism. This Hindu nation was born with Sanatana Dharma. With it, it moves. With it, it grows. When the Sanatan Dharma declines, then the nation declines. And if the Sanatan Dharma were capable of perishing, with the Sanatan Dharma, the nation would perish. This is an immortal line of Sri Aurobindo's. Why am I referring to this text is we have a number of questions. And a number of these questions can be answered. One can discover one's own answers in these seminal texts. And I'm insisting on these because they usually don't find place in our curriculum. Then we come to 1912, Bipin Chandra Pal, Hindu nationalism, what it stands for, in his book, 1912. So I'm coming down chronologically. And he says Hindu nationalism means neither selfish conflict with nor proud isolation from the other nations of the world. This is the uniqueness this is the speciality, the difference of Bipin Chandra Pal, a forgotten thinker, who gives you a global perspective, who analyzes Hinduism in the global perspective. And then he speaks about the Hindu conception of independence, Swadhinata, Swa, the meaning of Swa. And he says, for us, the corresponding term of independence, Anadhinata, not subjection. For us, it is Swadhinata, or self-subjection. And in his concept, it is the higher self. Self-restraint, self-regulation, self-dependence. So it is not unindependence. It is self-dependence, which is independence. It's a very interesting play of word and thoughts in his articulation. And then, of course, after that, we come to Radha Kumud Mukherjee, 1914, the fundamental unity of India. Again, a seminal text where he speaks about how India was united culturally, spiritually, long before its physical unity. And so one of the threads, one of the strains that continuously passes through all these thinkers is the fundamental cultural unity of India, which existed. Very interestingly, around this time, 1914, 1917, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, studying in Columbia under a very well-known American anthropologist, submits a paper on caste in India, their mechanism, genesis, and development. It's a very interesting paper. I mean, because I'm just looking at the chronological thoughts, the chronological advance of the thinking. But why do I mention this? Dr. Ambedkar speaks about, he says, in his paper, he says, I venture to say, he speaks about the unity of culture which is the basis of homogeneity. This Ambedkar many don't refer to. And then he says, I venture to say that there is no country that can rival the Indian peninsula with respect to the unity of its culture. It is not only a geographical unity, but it has over and above all a deeper and much more fundamental unity, an indubitable cultural unity that covers the land from end to end. I think one of the fundamentals of Sanatan Dharma is this awakening awareness of that undying cultural unity. And then, of course, there is Veer Savarkar. I mean, I had also brought relevant passages, which I'm not going to read. No, I mean, it can, if I can write a paper or a monograph for the VIF sometime later. I mean, many get intimidated with the, the markers and all that. So I'm not going to get into that, but fascinating passages. And to think that most of those who criticize Savarkar have actually not read Savarkar in the original. For example, a section of our ideologically motivated scholars in India are stuck with Golwalkar's "We Our Nationhood" defined. But they don't accept, or they'll not tell you that Golwalkar in his lifetime had disowned "We His Nationhood" defined. That was not the Golwalkar himself said. And so therefore, what happens is the attack or the misrepresentation is always selective. It is often not based on the original. It is a distorted version, or it is based on secondary and tertiary interpretations of the original. And therefore, that is where the distortion comes. And so Savarkar's Hindutva, 1920-21, and where he differentiates, he speaks about what is Hinduness, what is Hindutva. He translates Hindutva as Hinduness, and why it is not Hinduism. And he calls upon everyone to break forth the shackles of discrimination and focus on what that Hindutva is: a sacred land, a sacred space, common ancestors, etc. I mean, it's a very lyrical book. And at the end, I obviously would recommend Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee. It's not that he wrote a lot, but if one were to ask what is the politics of Sanatan Dharma or what is the politics of Hindutva, then Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee is a very interesting example. And in his writings, one clearly comes across as to what that conception of politics at that point of time, which called itself the Hindu Mahasabha, protection of Hindu rights, what it meant. And I'll just briefly quote and conclude. He says, and this was a conference in 1941 at Lahore. It was a conference on Hindu minorities. There was an India once upon a time where provinces where Hindus were also minority. There is an India where still Hindus are a minority. So protection of Hindu minority rights. And he says, we are fully prepared to offer equal rights of citizenship to all persons professing diverse races and religions, but residing in India, subject to only one condition. That condition is that they must identify themselves without reservations with India's joys and sorrows, will claim no separate entity of their own, and will be sons and daughters of Hindustan first and anything else next. I think there can be no differences with this stand, but in the selective dissemination of these texts that have been made by forces and powers who have been in control of research, of social sciences, of the academia post-independence, who ensured that all these figures were marginalized, who ensured that Had they been in control, Parthoda's book would have been very difficult to find a publisher for his book. So, friends, I certainly, I wanted to leave you with these thoughts. And so, not only 10 books, I think Parthoda can work on a series over a lifetime. Romain-Rolland, I think Jean-Christophe was what, 8 volumes, I think, or 10 volumes or 12 volumes, Jean-Christophe, Romain-Rolland's chef d'oeuvre. So I'm sure not only 10, you must not stop at 10, because there's a lot of exploration that we can do. And Swamiji here has spent a lifetime exactly, doing fundamentally, practically on the ground what I have very imperfectly articulated. It is essential that we get all these together. It is essential that there is interpretation amongst all these texts. It is essential that through these mega interpretations, we come out with a very fundamental articulation and narrative of Sanatan Dharma and of Hindutva. And at this moment, when we are on the cusp of India's century, works such as these, attempts such as these, will only have increasing relevance. Thank you so much for being so patient and for listening to me attentively. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ganguly, for that very passionate and forceful exposition and a kind of a tutorial for me, at least, on nationalism and Hindutva, not Hinduness. So, but I think your thing about a monograph is certainly a very good idea, and will happily accommodate that. So now I request Swamiji to kindly make his remarks.
Om Namo Brahmadibhyo Brahma Vidya Sampradaya Kartrubhyo Vanshrushibhyo Mahatbhyo Namo Gurubhyaha Sarvo Vaplavarahitah Pragnanaganah Pratyagartho Brahmaivahamasmi Om Shanti 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 Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavadvyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitan Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Oh. Blessed Sri Arvindji, the author Sri Parthoda, Anirbanji, and distinguished Bharatiyas, namaste to all of you. I'll take the liberty to present the traditional view, because I know I will not be branded as a fundamentalist, at least in this place. The Dharma is so profound, and because of this 800 years almost of foreign rule, where it was not an aggression on the land, but aggression on the culture and dharma both. Lot of narratives were floated in the name of dharma. And unfortunately, as they say, we have bought it also. Even after independence, no efforts were made to clarify that. Maybe out of ignorance or political compulsion, whatever the reason may be. But the time has come
when we have to put the things straight in order. One of the most popular confusion about our karma yoga, act without expecting result. So-called Nishkam Karma Yoga, Bhagavan has never said so. And I said it would be foolish to say so also. It is exactly like saying, if I am with someone for a few hours in a group of people having an interaction, each one of them is asking me a question. One person is not asking me anything. I asked him, hey, why haven't you asked me any question? Another reply was, Swamiji, I am dumb from the birth. मैं जन्म से गूंगा हूं, वो स्वयं बोल रहा है. It is called vadato vyagataha. If a teacher tells you, act without expecting the result, he expects that you should act. Understand the self-contradiction? No teacher can tell that you should act without expecting the result. And Krishna was Jagat Guru, not leader of some youth party of a youth wing, like we have one. He knew what the truth is. You cannot do anything without expecting result. When you came here, you did expect the Swami to come and Swami to talk some sense. And while I am talking, I also expect you to understand. Otherwise, I would have talked to wall, which some people talk. That's not the point. Pravajanam anuddishya mandopi na pravartate. Even a dumb, foolish fellow has some expectation. Even without expectation, you can't even sleep. At least that expectation is there that tomorrow I will get up at the same place. Suppose I have one chamcha and I keep staring at you, and you are wondering why Swami is looking at me, and that fellow comes to you and tells you, Swami is a great Jyotish. He can read astral faces. Obviously, there is a curiosity. What is there, Swami? You are looking at me constantly. No, nothing. No, please tell me something. Nothing. No, please tell me. And I tell, it's not worth telling, something serious. You have to tell me. And suppose I say, with the chamcha's background, that there is every possibility that tomorrow you may not wake up if you sleep tonight. Do you think that fellow will sleep? Even if he feels sleepy, she will not let him sleep. You can't. Similarly, we have never looked at what our dharma is. What in his end remark, Anirban said, we don't look at the original of dharma. Partly it's a narrative, and partly because language issues. In a culture or a society, when there is no wisdom or a concept, there are no synonym words for some other cultures, knowledge, wisdom, or concepts. Like even, we have so many dialects and languages. We don't have a synonym for Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is Wi-Fi. We don't have a synonym for internet. You can't say Antarjal. You can't make it. It is internet. Similarly, there is no synonym for dharma in English. Please note We are stuck with the word Hindu as a synonym of Sanatana, but Sanatana is not Hindu. But we accept it, now it is there with us. So also, Dharma is not religion. There are two meanings of Dharma, and if I put it in nutshell, what is Sanatan Dharma? It is so painful to read and know. Our Supreme Court also makes judgment on Dharma. I hope judges had studied something about it. They say there is a most prevalent belief that Hindu Dharma is a way of life. Have you heard this? Yes or no? Please tell me. Yes. No. Sanatan Dharma or Hindu Dharma is vision of truth. To gain this vision, what is the vision? I'll talk a little later. To gain this vision of the truth, Hindu culture or Sanatan Dharma has a vision of life. Vision of life is subservient to vision of truth, and that vision of life, to own up that vision of life, there is a way of life. It's subservient. By simply having a way of life, without the vision of life and without the vision of truth, nobody becomes Hindu. What is the vision of life? Popularly called as Chaturvid Purushartha. Iha ched avedit atha satyamasti na ched iha vedit mahati vinashti. Human birth is meant to discover one's own nature, is meant to discover the truth. And our Sanatan Dharma presents the truth in a one model. That is, I, the individual, the experiencer. In the Shastric language, it is called Jiva. What I experience, the world outside called as Jagat. And obviously, neither of them has created this creation. The creator called Ishvara. In other words, the Satya or the truth of Jeev, Jagat and Ishvara is revealed by Sanatan Dharma, and that is you. And that is his Vedanta. It is not something else, not somewhere going hereafter. You will have some better things over there than what you have here. No, that so-called moksha is right now and here only. Even going and coming is also meant to discover this fact. And this is a fact. We are not faith-based religion. When I go to this international conference, they always address leaders from various faiths. No. Since it's a fact, we are teaching tradition. And since it is a fact, every teacher can communicate to every student. And that's what Parthoda has quoted. And a very famous the incident in the life of Vivekananda and Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, when he asked, have you seen God? And he says, not only I have seen, but I can make you see also. A teacher can create another teacher. A mystic cannot create another mystic. We are blessed That is a gift. This is a Punya Bhumi, that we have inherited this vision and this teaching tradition which is there from the time immemorial. Even Rama had a teacher and he was born in this tradition. Krishna also had a teacher and he was born in this tradition. And before them, you look at the Valmiki Ramayana, so many kings have gone by. As Bhagavan says in the 4th chapter, Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Ham Avyam Ityadi. Sanatan Dharma is a teaching tradition, and vision of life is you discover the truth that is you. If I put it in a simple words, what we call moksha, please understand. We use the words and we gloss over them without understanding the exact meaning. The moksha word comes from the root much, means to be free. Moksha is not salvation. Moksha is freedom. Freedom from what? There is a freedom only when you are bound. As they say, in 60s, there was Goraksha Andolan. In those days, Rishikesh sadhus also joined. And there was a call to go out and procession, go hatya ban karo, gai ko rashtriya prani declare karo. They all started. Obviously, government had imposed that Indian Penal Code 144, not more the assembly of 5 can be there. So all these sadhus were arrested. Look at the culture. There was no jail in Rishikesh those days. Now it is there. And so they were transported to Dehradun jail. They were put in the jail. Next day, another group, go hatya, bhan karo, gai ko mata karo, sab. Again they were arrested, put into jail, taken to Dehradun. Third day, new batch, again taken over. By the time Dehradun jail was overcrowded. Fourth day, new group. So government decided, release the fellows who had come for the first day. Those who were arrested when the first day, they were released. And these fellows were put in the jail. After a week or so, they observed the same group keeps coming to jail. I ask for an expectation. One who wants to marry also wants to be, and I decided not to marry, not to become dukhi, to be happy. Even suicide is for happiness. Who commits suicide? The fellow who thinks I am the most unhappy fellow. He thinks there is no solution to my problems, hoping for some happiness. Release from dukkha. Even divorce is for what? Happiness. People who take divorce, they come to us, Swami ji, छूट गए, शांति हो गई. आत्मनस्तु कामाय सर्वविदं प्रियं भवति. Yajnavalkya tells to his wife Maitreyi, नवा पत्युः कामाय पतिः प्रियो भवति, नवा वित्तस्य कामाय वित्तं भवति. Every moment of your existence is to be happy. That means I want freedom from dukkha. How much happiness? Total. Total means purna sukham at all places, at all times, and under all circumstances. Here and there, in young age or youth or old age, every time. And Sanatan, that is why it is called Sanatan. This is a human problem. Ravana also had the same problem. Only nimitta changes. What makes you unhappy today? Maybe youngster may say, I don't have iPhone 14. I may not have this model of car. Ravana had everything. What he didn't have? In fact, you cannot imagine he had. Power he had, pleasure he had, name and fame he had, but I miss Sita. Just itna. There was one advertisement about Pepsi Cola when it was introduced. Ye dil mange more. He is always a human problem. Kitna bhi paisa ho, kitna bhi pleasure ho. And the moksha is that total happiness is you. Don't look for that happiness in America, like modern people. Don't look for that happiness in heaven or hell. Even having gone to heaven also, fellow will be unhappy, because when the God is sitting on the dais, somebody will be in the front row and somebody will be in the back row. Issues will be there. That is the vision, and that is why it is Sanatan. And that is why it is applicable, useful to anybody even today. Why we study Gita today? Because it is the essence of it. It doesn't address a topical problem of Arjuna. It addresses a fundamental problem because he asked for a solution. That is a human being fundamental problem, that I always find myself unhappy, dissatisfied with myself, discontent with myself. That is the Sanatan vision. The fundamental issue is this. And therefore the way of life is called Dharma. Please understand, Dharma doesn't mean belief. किसी ग्रंथ विशेष में आस्था रखना, किसी भगवान विशेष में आस्था रखना, किसी गुरु विशेष से मंत्र विशेष लेना, वो धर्म नहीं है. ट्रेडिशनल मीनिंग ऑफ धर्म. शरीर माध्यम खलु धर्म साधन. This body is meant for dharma. This country was called Dharma Kshetra. Even the word Arya Vrata, Arya is not a caste. Arya is Dharma. The one who is committed to Dharma is called Arya. Bhagavan says to Arjuna in the second chapter, Anarya Justam Aswaryam Kirtikaram Arjuna. Even Yudhishthira tells this in Mahabharata, I am an Arya. Anyway, the narrative has created, and it is still going on in the schools. Education that Aryans came from outside. The traditional meaning is Arya means the one who is committed to Dharma. And what is dharma? Vision of life, what is it is? Listen this carefully. And I think we Hindus should know this. Dharma means kartavya. What is my duty is dharma. Two types of dharma are talked about. The dharma primarily also means the swarupa, the truth. Yamaraja uses this word in Kathopanishad, nahi suviknayo anuresha dharma. Dharma, the life should be dharmic. That means I should be a person who is committed to my kartavya. This is the vision of life, and that is why Rama is Pujya. The Ram Rajya doesn't mean Rama being the king. Ram Rajya means establishing the symbol in the parliament. We always pray, Raja Dharmiko Vijayi Bhavatu. Even marriage is for dharma. Nowadays, youngsters look for compatibility, professional compatibility. Doctor will look for a doctorani. IT fellow will look for IT fellow. Architect will look for architect. That's not dharma. The word is sahadharmacharini and sahadharmachari. The suffix chari in Sanskrit means committed to the life. We have word brahmachari, committed to Brahman. We have another word karmachari, committed to karma. Except government employees, you have to make an exception to that. Similarly, dharmachari. Our marriage is meant for dharma, not astha vishesh. He is not England queen, उसके प्रति आस्था नहीं है. आज भी लोग बोलते हैं, हमें कभी कभी अकेले पुरुष आते होते हैं, कभी पत्नी को लेके आएंगे तो बोलेंगे स्वामी जी मैं मेरी धर्म पत्नी को लेके आया. कोई ये नहीं कहता है प्रोफेशनल पत्नी, शॉपिंग पत्नी, प्रोफेशन में साथ है शॉपिंग, वैसा नहीं है, धर्म के लिए. और पूरी शादी की विधि आप देख लीजिए, एक शब्द राइट का नहीं है. Whole thing is declaration of duty. Dharma means truth, and to gain the truth, I live a life of dharma, means I commit myself to my duty. You open any text, Ramayana and Mahabharata, by the way, in a traditional view, they are history, not mythology. And when I was leading this Ram Setu movement, I had have enough documentary proof from 16th century and 15th century where Rama's existence was there. Even that Karunanidhi who said, was Rama an engineer? He had written a preface to Ram Setu book. And in London Library, I got a map of Hindustan where it is mentioned that Neel and Jamban were the architect of the bridge which Rama built. And I don't need pramana from London. We never wanted paper proof. Our father told that is a proof. That is our culture. Even in villages, I have come across, way back in when we established our ashram, my teacher established in USA 45 years ago, and we needed a priest. So obviously from south, the priests were taken and then forms were filled up. The American embassy asked for, where is a marriage certificate? In villages, only handprints are there. छाप लगाते. वो प्रिंस बोला ये चुन्नू मुन्नू है प्रूफ और कुछ नहीं है. So many seniors who go to US because children are there and finally they apply for citizenship. I have known they want a birthday proof. They don't even birth certificate. We trusted our parents. Ramayana and Mahabharata is itihasa for us. Whether you open any Purana, you open any 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 grantha of Hindu Dharma, Smriti Grantha, there are chapters and chapters talking about, you know what? Brahmana Dharma, Kshatriya Dharma, Vaishya Dharma, Shudra Dharma, Grahastha Dharma, Brahmachari Dharma. Abar Bajpayee ji also used the word Raj Dharma. There are two types of dharma talked about. One Vishesha Dharma and another is Samanya Dharma. Universal Dharma. Vishesha Dharma is according to your position in a society. You are a son and a daughter and a father and a mother or grandfather, etc. to some people. Then what is expected out of you as that position is a Vishesha Dharma. Samanya Dharma is universal. That is called Satyam Vada Himsam Na Kuryat, etc. And for that you don't need a Swami. Nowadays Swamis talk this. You just need a common sense. What I want others to do unto me, I do the same thing to them. I want others to speak truth to me, I speak truth. What I don't want others to do unto me, I don't want anyone to hurt me, I should not also hurt. Simple. This is Dharma. Saman. It is universal. Even that Adivasi also expected there was one Mukhya and he the fellow had a kill and he said, no, I killed it, and fellow said, I killed it. Dharma, Saman. So way of life was committed to Dharma, and there was a structure called Varnashrama Vyavastha. It was meant for this moksha, total happiness. And that happiness, listen this carefully, Ananda, Sukham, Purnatvam and Shanti are synonym. When you feel sense of completeness, you are happy. There is a Shanti. You can't say, Swamiji, I am Ashanta, but I am happy. You can't say that. They are synonym. Satyam Gnanam Anantam Brahma, that is you. That is a truth. That is Tattvasi. That is Hindu Dharma. And when we are talking of Bharata being Vishwaguru, if what Anirban said, it is my view, I also take freedom to tell my view. When Vivekananda is our inspirational role model, we need to commit to our kartavya first. My dharma to my parents, Matrudevo Bhava, Pitrudevo Bhava, etc. Beginning from there, dharma to neighbors, dharma to society, and the most missing thing is Rashtra Dharma Kartavyata. One can be born as a Hindu, but to be a Hindu, to live as a Hindu, is a one who is committed to Dharma, which leads to the discovery of the fact that I am Nitya Shuddha Buddha Mukta Swarupa. That is called Tattvamasi Mahavakyam. That is called Hinduism. Whatever they call it. But that is based on Vedic teaching. And that is why we say Purna Madav, Purna Midam, Purnat, Purna Mudit. Hindu Dharma cannot be evolving. How can you improve infinity? I am infinite. How can you improve? Apuryamana Machala Pratishtam Samudra Mapa Pravishanti. That is called Sthita Prajna. And that vision needs to be studied from a competent teacher because it is in the form of the words. Very beautifully, Shankaracharya ji says somewhere, Ekasmad Guroho Shrumbadam Madhye Kaschid Pratipadyate, Kaschid Na Pratipadyate, Kaschid Apratipadyate, Kaschid Vipratipadyate. When they are listening from one teacher, somebody understands, someone doesn't understand, someone understands little, and someone understands just the opposite of what is taught. There are so many incidents. By the way, this whole Bhagavad Gita was told to Dhritarashtra. We have only video recording. Therefore, the first sentence is Dhritarashtra Uvacha Sanjaya. He didn't understand. Arjuna could say Nasto Moha Surdhi Labda because he was ready to gain the knowledge. That preparedness for knowledge is gained by life of Dharma. And our country, every citizen was committed to life of Dharma. That is what Parthaji also has mentioned. He has given how to bring in Sanatan Dharma in our modern concept. Nothing. Let's be committed to our duties. What our Modi ji often says, nation first, duty first. In the name of human freedom, there is a very thin line of demarcation between licentiousness and freedom. Country can be Vishwaguru not simply by enhancing GDP. America also has that GDP. And many countries have had. But what makes us unique is this wisdom by which you can be happy with yourself and by which you can discover the fact Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which Parthaji also has analyzed. I took this liberty out of my pain because so much of confusion prevails about our dharma and our culture, which Parthaji has mentioned in the book. Anirbanji dealt with so many aspects of it, but we have to expose ourselves to our dharma. God is a most abused word. So also Hindu dharma is most abused. Without referring to, without studying to, everybody has opinion about it. And we Hindus ourselves carry that opinion, which pains me. I hope we get opportunity to have good teacher who knows Shastra, who knows the art of communication. It is very important what to talk and what not to talk. And thereby we may understand and we may own up this rich heritage with which we are blessed. Is something which you just cannot quantify. And in a concluding remark, I would say, world needs this more today. Hindu Dharma is only source, only hope left for the world to be happy and peaceful. Nothing else. Namaste.
So friends, you had an exposition of Hinduism, which in one word is dharma, which in one word is duty, and which in one word is happiness
Fullness.
and fullness. But I think this sets us thinking about many concepts which are there in the